Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send our way, could be articles, maybe some research, or like today, a narrative, and we really dig in.
Yeah, try to find those key insights, the surprising bits.
Exactly. We want to give you that shortcut to being well informed, finding those, nuggets of knowledge that really stick.
Hmm.
So today we're diving into something, well, ancient, deeply symbolic. It's the mythical origins of wine in classical Greece.
Right, and we're looking at a specific mythological text that one of you shared.
And it really flips the script, doesn't it, on how we usually think about wine. We think parties, pleasure.
Celebration, yeah.
But this story ties the very first vine to, well, tragedy, sacrifice, and the complex nature of the god Dionysus.
And that's really our mission with this deep dive looking at this text. We're not just retelling the story. We want to ask why. Why does this myth show wine having this profound, almost dual nature?
Yeah, why was it seen as sacred but also kind of sorrowful, yet still tied up with ecstatic celebration?
Precisely. It's that mix we want to unpack.
Okay, so let's get into the narrative itself. It kicks off painting this really vivid picture of Dionysus.
Hmm.
We see him cloaked in leopard skins, right? Crowned with ivy.
Yes, and he's on this major journey heading towards India, according to the source.
And his entourage, the text, describes it in detail.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating. It's not just a few friends. It's this huge procession. You've got satyrs, nymphs, human followers, too.
Wow.
And they're all caught up in what the text calls ecstatic, almost wild worship.
So it sounds intense. But the journey itself, it's not just about travel A to B, is it? The story suggests something more.
Exactly, yeah. The text is clear. This is much more than just physical travel. It's framed as metaphysical, spiritual even.
How so?
Well, every stop they make becomes this sacred celebration. There are bonfires, music, lots of dancing, and of course wine. It all blends into this ritualistic ecstasy.
Okay.
But, and this is crucial, the narrative points out this haunting emotional current running underneath all the fun, the revelry.
Haunting. So not just pure joy.
No. It frames the whole thing almost like a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And it's fueled, yes, by joy, but also by shared memory, even shared sorrow.
Okay. Shared sorrow. That leads us to the core revelation in this myth, doesn't it?
It really does.
It challenges our modern view of wine as just, a nice drink, something for a good time.
Completely. This narrative presents wine as something fundamentally different. It calls it a sacramental substance.
Sacramental, wow.
Yeah, a divine elixir. But not just a pleasure. It's specifically described as being imbued with pain and sacrifice.
Imbued with pain, that's strong.
It is. It's called a gift, but one that's laced with pain, tragedy, and spiritual transformation.
So the implication is when his followers drink the wine, they're not just, drinking.
That's exactly the idea in this myth. It's not just consumption. With every sip, they're unknowingly taking in this deeper story, participating in it.
A story of love and sacrifice, you mentioned.
Precisely. That's the foundational story here.
And that story revolves around a figure named Ampelos.
Ampelos, yes. The narrative introduces him as Dionysus' first love.
Okay. And what's he like?
He's described as this beautiful, mortal youth, full of life, carefree, maybe a bit bold.
Their relationship sounds idyllic then, joyful.
Very much so. One of intense joy, freedom, but, like so many Greek myths.
There's a catch.
There's always a catch. It's marked by hubris, that sort of dangerous overconfidence, challenging the gods.
Ah, hubris. Right. And what was Ampelos' specific act?
Well, he decides to ride a wild bull, which is risky enough. But then, maybe caught up in the moment, youthful pride, he boasts. He claims that not even the gods could throw him off this bull.
Oh, dear. That's textbook hubris, isn't it? Asking for trouble.
Pretty much. In this moment, it sets up the divine consequence. The narrative is specific about the punishment.
What happens?
A wasp, which the text presents as a symbol of divine retribution, interestingly, it stings the bull.
And the bowl.
Throws Ampelos. He's killed. Falls to his death. Just like that.
Wow. Tragic. And Dionysus' reaction must have been immense.
The text describes it as epic, profound, a truly transformative mourning.
Transformative how? This is where the vine comes in, right?
This is exactly it. The myth gives this incredibly potent, specific origin story for the grapevine.
So what does it say?
It says that from Ampelos' blood, where it soaked into the earth, the very first vine grew.
From his blood?
Yes. And then from Dionysus' own tears, shed in grief. The grapes themselves emerged.
Tears becoming grapes, blood becoming the vine. That's powerful imagery.
It really is. And what's compelling about this specific version of the myth is how directly it fuses these themes. Love, death, transformation.
Right.
It strongly suggests that beauty, even ecstatic joy in this context, is born directly from the deepest sorrow. It doesn't shy away from that link.
So this devastating event happens. Ampelos dies, the vine is born. Then the narrative says Dionysus shares this story with his followers.
He does. He tells them what happened to Ampelos, the origin of this plant, this drink.
And how does that land? How does it change things for them, their understanding of wine?
It fundamentally transforms it, completely shifts the perspective.
So it's not just for parties anymore?
Not at all. Wine is no longer just a drink for, letting loose. Each cup now becomes a kind of memorial to Ampelos.
A memorial.
Yeah. The act of drinking itself becomes an act of remembrance. And more than that, a form of transmutation, taking that grief and transforming it. It becomes a spiritual event, not just a social one. The narrative really leans into this. It describes the wine now as a sacred relic.
A relic, like holy.
In a sense, yes. An alchemical blend of loss and celebration. That's the phrase used.
An alchemical blend, I like that.
It really underscores the idea that even in moments of intense joy, the shadows of sorrow are still present. They're acknowledged, part of the experience.
No, so the journey towards India, it continues after this, but with this new layer of meaning attached.
Yes, exactly. The narrative shows Dionysus dancing again. His followers join him. The revelry continues.
But it's different now.
It's different because they are different. They dance with a new awareness, the text says.
An awareness of the story.
Of the story, of the sacrifice. The celebrations still happen, they still feel the joy, but now it's interwoven with this deep reverence. They're honoring Dionysus's grief, honoring Ampelos' legacy in the very act of celebration.
That's quite a complex emotional state.
It is. And the narrative's description of the ongoing journey towards India, it also seems to take on more weight.
How so?
It feels like it symbolizes more than just getting to a place on a map. It hints at future trials, maybe challenges, where Dionysus has to confront not just external enemies, but the spiritual legacy of his own myth.
Meaning the weight of this origin story he now carries.
Possibly, yeah. The complex mix of creation and destruction, joy and sorrow, that defines him and his gift of wine.
Thinking about this whole narrative, it feels like it's doing more than just explaining where wine came from for the ancient Greeks.
Oh, I agree.
The source seems to be using it as a kind of metaphor, doesn't it, for broader human experiences.
It absolutely does feel that way. The narrative offers parallels you can see all over life, really.
It's like what? What kind of parallels?
Well, think about how often joy is mixed with sorrow, right? That bittersweet feeling, like at a wedding, you might be incredibly happy, but also feel a pang for loved ones who aren't there.
Yeah, that happens.
Or think about art, how much great art, music, writing, it comes from dealing with trauma or pain. There's a transformation there.
True. Creativity from struggle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's even there in how we sort of ritualize grief, how traditions give us ways to process loss, to give it a sacred space in a way.
So the myth reflects those universal things.
I think that's what the narrative suggests, yes. It holds up this story of Dionysus's wine and says, look, the pleasures and traditions in your own lives, they might also carry these deeper meanings, these complex origins, if you pause and reflect on them.
Right. We just don't always think about where things come from.
We often don't.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into this really fascinating narrative. The key takeaway seems to be that wine, yes, it's a symbol of joy, connection, celebration.
Yeah.
But in this telling, it's also this powerful emblem of, mortality, of grief, and the potential for transformation through sorrow.
Yeah, the myth makes that profound point, I think, that true celebration, at least in this specific context, doesn't ignore the pain or the loss that might have been its seed, its origin.
It embraces both.
It embraces both. It suggests that every sip, every shared glass in this mythical view connects you to something divine, something tragic, and something eternal all at once.
Powerful stuff.
It leaves you thinking, doesn't it? I mean, considering this narrative's view, this tragic origin for wine,
Yeah.
it really makes you wonder what other common pleasures or rituals or traditions in our lives today might have surprising, maybe even somber origins that we've just forgotten over time.